Everybody wants to know how to prepare, what to do, how to be ready for what is potentially coming. Well, here is how we prepare today. First off, the CPI report is now out, and we are now sitting at 8.3% inflation. That is good news, that inflation went down. However, if you look into the CPI report, you see a bunch of bad news. You see broadening inflation. It's broad-based. That's not good. Now, I want to address what was in the CPI report. I want to talk about the things that went up. I want to talk about some of the things that went down. I also want to give you some insights as to what we are looking at moving forward this week. There's some critical things happening this week that we could actually see inflation shoot up next month. All right? So let's get right down to it. All I ask is if you can just spend 2 seconds, go ahead, hit that like button. Also, consider hitting the subscribe button so you never miss an update. But let's get right down to it. And here's what we are seeing in the CPI report. Today, we saw increases in shelter, in food, new vehicles, car insurance, education, and even medical care indexes. This is where we saw some of the increases. Now, what we are also seeing is these were heavily offset because we saw increases in these, which means we should have saw inflation go from 8.5 to maybe 8.6, 8.7%. However, it went down because of one thing. The one thing that brought it down is also one of the things that experts are anticipating is going back up, and that is fuel. They say that these indexes were heavily offset by the 10.6% decline in gasoline prices. And keep in mind, and I've been talking about this for the past few weeks, is the expectation is gasoline prices are going to slowly trickle down, which they have, and then once they kind of hit that bottom, and again, we don't know exactly where that's going to be, but once we hit that bottom, and some are expecting that bottom is going to happen sometime this month, and once we hit that bottom, then we're going to see it slowly start going back up, and then after the midterm elections, that's when it's really going to shoot back up. Okay? And keep in mind, we are still pulling 1 million barrels of oil from our strategic petroleum reserves. Well, this is going to end at the end of October. So once this ends, guess what? That means we are going to see prices increase. We're going to see the government go and buy 60 million barrels of oil almost instantly, which is going to pull that out of the market. So if we think, okay, inflation's going down, that's great at 8.3%, guess what? That's not what it's going to look like. We are going to see increases in shelter and food. New vehicles is still going to go up, right? Education is going to go up. Medical care indexes, again, going to go up. And when they do, and they are also pushed up by gasoline prices, guess what? We could easily be sitting at a 9, 10, 11% inflation rate. So things are not looking great. Also keep in mind, and this is putting more upward pressure on shelter, is the Federal Reserve must increase rates in order to bring down inflation, right? We know this. We've been talking about this for the past year. When the Federal Reserve does this, it makes it more difficult to buy a house because it makes it more expensive, which means less people are looking to buy a home and are looking to rather rent. This means the demand for rentals increases, which actually pushes up the price of those rents. Now, here's the other thing. And again, and this is a lot of the news coming out recently is, okay, shelter isn't seeing big increases. That's good. But when you look into it, and again, shelter and housing, it lags by months, many months, 6 months to a year even. So the expectations are that rents are going to continue to increase every single month. When they do, it's going to push inflation higher. So even though we're just sitting at 8.3% and we came down from 8.5%, don't think that, okay, we kind of reached that little tipping point. Now we're headed back down. That's not the way it's going to work. Now it can, just to be very clear on this, it can work that way if the Federal Reserve comes out and just bumps rates, raises rates 200-300 basis points. That could do it. Now, one of the problems, one of the big issues that we've been talking about recently is food. We're seeing food shortages, and let me touch on this for a second, just because we're not all seeing food shortages. When we go to the grocery store and it's like that $1.49 loaf of bread that I always buy, it's not there. It's a shortage, right? And everyone freaks out like, oh, we don't have the bread. Well, here's the thing. Maybe the loaf of bread for $1.49 isn't there. But there's probably one, you just look a little bit to the left or look a little bit to the right, there's probably one for $4.99, $5.99, $6.99 that's sitting there all alone that has a bunch of loaves of bread. But guess what? Nobody wants to buy that. Nobody wants to spend 4 times as much on a loaf of bread just because it's there. So that's kind of what we're seeing is there's not a shortage of all items. Some items, especially the lower price items, are pretty much being sold out quickly. And it's because food increased by 0.8% month over month. That's a 9.6 annualized increase. About 10%. Nobody wants to pay, if they're used to paying $10 for an item, nobody wants to pay $11 now. And that's kind of what we're seeing. Now, just to give you an idea how hot this inflation report was, all indexes minus food and energy still rose by 0.6% month over month. That's a 7.2% annualized rate, which is still way too high for the Federal Reserve's liking. So keep that in mind. We are not there yet. We are not out of the woods. Things are going to get worse. We also know medical care rose by 0.7% month over month. It also rose by 0.4% from July to August. Okay, so keep that in mind that medical care actually rose at a faster rate month over month. And that's very concerning for older Americans that tend to spend more of their income on medical services. We also know airline fares continue to decline, but we also have a problem with this decline. Now, they declined last month. They decreased 4.6% month over month. That's a decrease of 55.2% annualized. But the issues that we are now facing is that airline fares are not falling as fast as they once did. Because back in July, airfares declined 7.8%, not 4.6%. So their decline was greater over a month ago. That's part of the problem. Is the decline slowing down? It will stop and then temporarily come back up. And it could actually do that. And here's what's very concerning about this CPI report. And it is that we are seeing broad-based inflation. Broad-based inflation is much harder for the Federal Reserve to control outside of simply raising rates at a faster pace. The expectations as of right now, again, the CPI report just came out this morning. The expectations are that the Fed will need to raise rates by at least 75 basis points this month, which is coming in a couple weeks or like 10 days. But there's also a 19% chance we see a 100 basis point rate hike. If this happens, I guarantee you the markets will freak out. This is going to push mortgage rates up past 6.3, 6.4%. This is going to cause millions of potential home buyers that are looking now. Now, I don't even know if there's millions. Let's say hundreds of thousands of potential home buyers that are looking right now to simply say, you know what? It's getting too expensive. I'm out. And when that happens, guess what? Shelter and rents going to go up. For those that are on Social Security, a CPI-W report also came out, and it came in at 8.7%. I know a lot of people are very frustrated with Social Security, with CPI reports as well, being that, and I see this all the time, that a lot of people are saying, you know what, the government's just trying to screw Social Security recipients. they don't want to give them a higher cost of living adjustment. So what do? They give them a lower CPI read. And I can see why they say that, because historically that's kind of what happens. But just understand, for the average Social Security recipient, you're still going to receive about $150 extra every single month. Now, that is unless next month the CPI report comes in and we see inflation at like 5%, but I highly doubt that. Chances are we're actually going to see it increase or stay right at 8.3, 8.4%. So we're going to see what happens there. But the good news is there is going to be a pretty big cost of living adjustment for 2023. And as soon as I know exactly what that is, and that will be next month at this time on October 13th, next month, okay, again, a month from today, chances are we are going to have the official cost of living adjustment announced. So once that is announced, I promise I will bring you that as quickly as possible. Now, let's talk about the other big news that has come out this week. And this is something I've been touching on over the past few days. And again, I'm going to continue to talk about this until potentially Friday or even longer. And the thing that I've been discussing is the possibility of a rail strike that could happen on Friday. Now, what we know is that 10 out of the 12 unions have already agreed and accepted the deal that's on the table. One of the reasons why they're accepting this is because it gives them higher wages, right? It goes up. But there's also a problem. There's actually two of the unions. One's it's called, shortened BLET, which is the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen. And then the other one's the Smart Transportation Division. They both want a better quality of life. Now think about this. They have said that current carriers' scheduling practices have too many workers on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every single week of the year. Which means they can't go anywhere, they can't travel, they can't really do anything, and if they ever were to get that call, which sometimes they do, if they ever get that call, they gotta leave, they gotta go to work. Now obviously they're getting paid fairly well, but it's the quality of life. That is what they want. Well, this is the problem, is that these negotiators are listening to what they want. They want a better quality of life, but they say that's not something that they can do. So they just give them more money. Well, the union's presidents had this to say, and I want you to listen very carefully to what's going on here. Okay? They said this, and I quote, "The railroads are using shippers, consumers, and the supply chain of our nation as pawns in an effort to get our unions to cave into their contract demands, knowing that our members would never accept them." That's exactly what's happening. These carriers are actually putting the pressure on the workers, trying to get them to cave. And they are doing this because they understand how serious of a situation it would be if a rail strike does take place. Not just in any economy, but especially this one that is currently struggling. We are currently seeing 8.3% inflation. We are currently seeing millions of open positions, right? We're currently experiencing a very low unemployment rate. While we're seeing these things, right, while the Federal Reserve's attempting to raise rates and control inflation, right, the problem is we could potentially be in a world of hurt come next week. But I want you to keep this in mind. Right now, BLET and the Smart TD are both fighting for a better quality of life. And this has actually been rejected multiple times by federal mediators, that this is not something that can be done. It's not doable. But here's the thing, this is their demand. Okay? This is the demand of the workers. So workers do not get this, they will likely not back down. This would mean Congress would have to come in and either extend the no strike rule, which is going to make many of these workers very upset, or Congress is going to have to pretty much demand them accept this deal. And you gotta do it. Now, here's the problem. So if negotiations are met at some point, there will be some major changes as to how quickly products get moved across the United States, because again, the quality of life. Now, if there isn't an agreement on these negotiations, the strike's likely to happen. So either way, there's going to be some major shakeups that happen. Either we see better quality of life for these workers, which means they're not going to be on call all the time, which chances are they're going to, unless we get more people coming in and working, but chances are what's going to happen is, okay, you're not on call this week. You're not on call this week. So you can go on vacation, go do whatever you want. Problem is, if we need a shipment, something has to be shipped, something has to be moved. The problem is we may not have the personnel to do it. So it would sit. And that would actually create a little bit of a backlog until the conductor and the employees come back to work. So either way, there's going to be major changes seen from the American people because of this negotiation. All right? So that's what I can tell you at this time. As always, as I know more, I promise, I'll come back on and share all latest news and updates. Again, just want to thank you guys for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.